The next step is to add our chat functionality. We have our chat page now. We have the ability to select one of our assets. It shows our chat message, but we want to actually be able to input messages and then see them populate with our selected avatar. The other thing I want to do is once we pick one of our tokens, I want to hide the selection of it so that, let me take that out. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a data collection that will store all of the messages. So if we go to data collections and users, we're going to create a new collection. We're going to call this messages. And we're going to want to add several fields. So the first is going to be the asset ID. And this is which token you were chatting as when you sent the message. The next will be the collection slug. So this is so that we know which room you sent the message in. We want a date time created, so we know when the message was sent. We'll have a timestamp. And we'll want a image. And lastly, the message itself. So those will be the fields for our messages that get saved in the database. They're now also going to be populating into this grid list that we have for our messages. And so we need to create some actions to load up these messages. The way that we want to do it is have an action that loads messages, and we'll call that every time the API call is sent to pick a different avatar or pick a different room, and we'll also call it every time you load the page and come into the room. We'll also call it when there is a change to the collections in the database, meaning if another user connected and sent a message in, we want that change to pop up for all users. And so we'll also use this flow to do that. So let's create a new flow, and we'll call it refresh messages. And in here, we want to do one simple action, which is load our messages into that grid. So we'll do element set value. We're going to use our grid list that's in our chat feed. The value is going to be from a data collection. The table is going to be our messages table. And for fields, we want to say get all fields. But we want to add a sort because we want the newest messages to be at the top. So the sort will be date and time created descending. So the newest messages at the top. And then we also want to add a filter so that we only load messages for the room that we're in. So to do that, we add a filter. And the field that we want to filter on is our collection slug. And this has to match the variable that we have for our collection slug. So that's going to be on the root page, and that variable, we called it just slug. Actually, I'm sorry, this is on the parent page, and the variable is just slug from our API response. And that's all we need to do for our refresh messages. Let's go ahead and add the data listener as well. So we'll click on the menu up here and go to page properties. And under data listeners, we want to add a listener for when our messages collection is updated. So hit a new data listener. And the action that we want to execute is the one we just created, refresh messages. And we want to do this by listening to the messages collection. And we can limit this to only on, add, or remove. So when new messages are posted or if a message is deleted, it'll refresh our feed there. So now we have a way to refresh these messages, but we want to call this on page load. And we also want to add functionality that will let us send a message. So first, let's do on page load. After we make the API call, after we set our element, let's add another one for run flow on page. And we're going to run on the current page the action refresh messages. So that will trigger this when the page loads. The last piece of functionality here is to input, to activate our input so that when we hit send, it actually sends a message. And we can do that on our button. So we have this send button here. We want to go into events, new event on click. We're going to create a new flow and we'll call this send message. Create that flow. And the first thing we want to do is create a record. So data, create record. This is going to be a record in our messages collection. Let's start first with the asset ID. We're going to use a variable on our current page, and it's called asset ID. Next field will be our slug. This is a variable on our current page called collection slug. The next field will be the image, which is our asset image. So it'll be a variable called asset image. And then we want our message, which is from our input element, text input, the value. And I'm going to add a path that says to string 1. And really what this does is it will just parse the input and make sure that we are saving a string into the database. I'll go more into that in a future tutorial, but that's a good way to just sanitize your data before you put it into the database. And then the last thing is date, time, and created. This will be, how do we want to do this? We want to do from system value. So system, the last one. And the value to bring is going to be full date and time. And again, I won't go into it on this lesson, but we do want to add a path that is date to Unix timestamp. And basically this function will take the current date, convert it to a Unix timestamp, which is a number of seconds since a certain point in history. And it will pass that into our database. That's the format that we're expecting. So we'll create the record. The next thing we want to do is clear out the message that we just entered into our chat box. So we'll use element set value. And on our text input, we just want to set that to blank. And that will send our message. So that's how we will send the message once we hit submit. And since we have a data listener listening for those changes, anytime we send a message, it should just auto update. Now, the one thing we didn't do is connect our grid list to our data collection. So let's do that real quick so that we have our data set. Now we did in our refresh messages, just to go back a step, we did set the value of the grid itself, but we didn't update our row to tell it to use those data points. So in our row for chat message, we're going to go under data, and we're going to say that this record value is from a field in our messages collection, and that field is the image. And then the message itself is going to be also from a field in our database collection called messages, and the field is message. Real quick, a couple mistakes I just realized that I made in my asset thumbnail set selected asset flow. I set these variables on the root page. I actually want to set them on the parent page, but the parent is our room detail. So let's set these to the parent page. Right. So now if we test this out, connect to MetaMask, pick our collection, pick our NFT. Hello. This is my first message. And we see here, hello, this is my first message with my avatar for my NFT. I can send another message and hit send, and we'll see that the newer messages are on top. I can pick a different asset, click on a different token and say a different token. And now I can see I'm chatting as a different token in this message. So you can see how you can have multiple people loading in. Obviously, the whole concept of an NFT is you're the only one who owns that token. So you could have everyone, be able to only see the tokens that they have, and you'll know who's who because nobody could have the same two tokens. Third ape joined. I can't type and talk. And you can see how the message history just fills in, and we'll have the newest messages on top. The last thing to do is to add our back button functionality so that we can go back and go into a different room. So let's do that real quick. We'll go into our back button and we'll create a new event on click, and we'll have a new flow called go back. And what we want to do in this flow is we actually want to trigger the opposite of what we did when this page loaded. So if you remember, in here we had a flow for opening a room. We basically want to, and we opened this page into the container, we basically want to do the inverse of this, and we want to hide the room. So I'm going to create a new flow, and I'm going to call it close room. And in here, all we really need is instead of showing this room detail, we want to hide it. So we'll create a new action, hide completely, and we'll hide that room detail. And that will close it out. And then we should just be able to select a different one and go into a different room. So let's test that. So I'll connect. I'm going to pick the same room just to show an example. We can see our messages from the last visit are here. I'm going to select an ape. I'm going to type a message. Hey everyone, hit send. We see it adds in. Now I'm going to hit back, and I see the mistake I made. I didn't connect the go back action to our hide action. So, and go back, I'm going to say run flow on page. And the page that I want to run this on is the parent page. And that is called room row. And the action is close room. So now I can see when I hit the back button, it takes me back to the list of all rooms. I can go into a different room. So let's go into this one. And we can see here I've got a different set of tokens with a different message history. So I'll say my first bunny message and send that. I can see that one post. I'll change it to another one and say another bunny joined and send that in. And we can see this is a different room, different message history, and I can switch back and forth between them. So if I go back in to this one, I see this message history. So that's the concept. Obviously, you'd want to extend this. You know, you want to do something visually to show that you've selected a certain one. Like I said, maybe you hide the rest of these, or you outline the one that you've selected, so that once this pops up, you know for sure who you're chatting as. But that's the idea. That's how you add your chat functionality, and also how you use data listeners to load new messages once the data in the data set has changed. So I hope this was helpful for you, and be on the lookout. I'll continue doing more of these tutorials, walking through MetaMask, OpenSea, and various functionality within Web3. All right, thanks for joining.